What's up, YouTube? Today we are talking about 3D printers. How cheap are they? What kind of filaments you need? And how hard it is to get started. Today on Hobbies and Hot Rods. I recently had a comment on one of the videos asking what kind of 3D printer I used and if I could do a setup video on it, so I'll try and cover as much stuff in this video as I can. There's so many different variables and things to talk about with new printers and how printers are coming along. We'll try and stick to the basics, under $500 printers. It's pretty simple for the most part, but I'll try and cover everything that I think is important to know. Okay, to start off, my printers are Creality. The small one is an Ender 3, and the larger one is a CR10. Both of these are really popular printers. The Ender 3 is probably I would say the 350 Chevy of printers. Everybody has them. You can print all kinds of accessories. Really simple to use and under $200 in a lot of cases. There's different variations. This is this is an Ender 3X, which it comes with the metal extruder, which you'd probably want to buy if you got one anyway. And the table is glass. This right here is just a pad that all of them come with. A guy at work really likes these more than glass, and I figured I'd try it out. It's harder to clean than glass. It's like a flexible fiberglass type stuff. And you can see, though, you can pop it off. If you had a piece on here, you can pop it off and bend it and not have to scrape on your table surface. With a glass table, you really need a putty knife, and a lot of people say that you can print with glass at 65 degrees and it just sticks. Well, if it's absolutely clean, yeah, sometimes it will. It's supposed to stick, but a lot of us just use glue because it saves the headache of risking every time it coming loose. And I use Elmer's glue. It is purple when it goes on, and it's water soluble too. So even if you have it on the back, it's not that big of a deal when you pull your piece off to wash this glue off. I don't know how many prints I got in, 2, 3 to 7 hours, and the corners will start to curl up simply because it just came undone. And this is a lot rougher surface, so you usually don't need any kind of adhesive, but after a while, this will probably get smoother. And some people still use hairspray or glue. Like I said, Elmer's glue is great because it's water soluble. I think I have a piece here with some... Yeah, you can see the bottom of this is a little dull looking. And the only downside of glue is you won't get that shine. And being this is black anyway, like I said, it rinses right off, but you can still see the sticky, you can still feel it. It doesn't go away. And a lot of times I'll just keep putting glue on the table until I think it's too thick and it starts running my tolerances out. So both of these are pretty much the same. The Ender 3 is just smaller. The extruder and the head are the same. They both have the same fan for the nozzle. This is the nozzle fan, and this is the fan to cool down your extruder. Basically, you just have your filament running through. There's a little gear here with a wheel. Yeah, you can see this metal extruder this comes with a plastic one originally. If you had a plain Jane Ender 3, this would be plastic, and it would come with this surface. I put a little handle on here so you can turn the extruder shaft from the servo motor when you want to run it in here. Well do that in a little bit, but the filament just goes through there, comes out this tube into a heater, and it's usually between 185 and 240 degrees Celsius most of the time, depending on what kind of filament you're printing. And the fan here blows out this little shroud. This isn't a stock shroud. I printed this. And it comes out that little... Can I get a picture here? comes out this little hole and blows on the nozzle. And the purpose for this fan is to cool off the filament as it's coming out. So you can cool it off faster and it hardens faster, getting a little bit better of a shape. The idea most of the time is to print as much as you can without any support, because support can make your model look not as good. It'll have a rougher finish. Sometimes it breaks right off and you can't notice, but most of the time it's a rougher finish. And if you can print with no support, it just looks that much better. So the Ender 3, I got this on Black Friday for $185, and it came with the metal extruder and the thicker springs. Everybody gets thicker springs. Used to not have these adjuster knobs on the original Ender 3, but now they do. It's a lot easier to level your bed out. You have to manually level this bed. And these springs are pretty weak on the original, and they're stiffer now. But anyway, it came with stiffer springs, the metal extruder. That's about $25. Well, you could probably get it for $15 on Amazon. And so that was a pretty good deal. You could probably get this right now for $199, $220 maybe. It's probably cheaper on Creality's website than it is on Amazon. And I think it's still free shipping. This is the first printer I got simply because it was bigger. I pulled up the manual to see the size difference, and I don't know if you can see on there. But anyway, it is the CR10's print size is 300 by 300 by 400 millimeters. And the Ender 3 is 220 by 220 by 250. So, huge difference. The thing is I was printing so often to this one that, 80% of the stuff you're going to print is going to be, it's not going to be maxing out to the size. You know what I mean? It's going to be small stuff like this. And a good comparison is this model takes up almost this whole bed. So there's that much difference. And if you want to do tall stuff, this is the way to go. But I think I paid $380 for this one. And so about $400, you get a lot of printer. And it does have, like this one has the box attached to it. It takes up less space. But pretty much it's just size difference. You can get different motherboards for these. You can get different operating systems for them. Very cheap. I think a motherboard's like $15. And I would say, if this is a 350 Chevy, this is probably the 5.3 LS because everybody gets these too. And they do a great job for what they are. Pretty quick. You can do several different filaments. I printed out, there's so many different kinds of printers now. You've got, this is an FDM printer, or a fused deposition modeling printer, or a fused filament fabrication, a FDM or FFF, a lot of people call them. Probably the most common. And stereolithography, that is a resin printer. Digital light processing, also a resin printer as far as I know. Selective laser centering, don't know much about that. SLM, I'm pretty sure is metal. LOM, don't know that one. And digital beam melting, I don't know that one either. But when I Googled types of 3D printers, I was like, wow, I didn't know there's that many categories, but there is. Materials you can print in this. Almost everybody's going to use just regular PLA most of the time. That's the most common. It is a little less susceptible to heat. I wouldn't leave it in the sunlight for a long time, probably warp. But it is pretty strong. And you can always do more infill to have a stronger piece too. I'm printing TPU right here, which is a flexible type material. I always say it's soft enough to be a tire, but harder than rubber. This is one that I printed for the Slash. And this is going to be a pad for a jack stand for a big RC car. And I printed the jack stands. Now we got to print the screw and the knob to go on top of it with the cradle. And it'll have a set screw, and it's going to go underneath of the Super Baja Ray over here. So back to business here. We'll go ahead and get this Ender 3 going. Another thing I wanted to mention is with the Ender 3, it does come with a pretty cool option. If you're in the middle of a print, the power goes out, when the power comes back on, the screen will say, do you want to continue print? And you just come back down here and hit yes, and it continues. With the CR10, you don't have that option. Also, it doesn't have a switch for the filament. If you run out of filament, if you're gone at work and you're in the middle of a 3-day print, say, and you think it'll last, but it doesn't. So the filament goes through here, and it'll just keep running all day and think there's filament in there. And you'll just have wasted 2 days or 8 hours or however long. And you can put a limit switch. You can print a little box to put a limit switch in here and then run a wire inside of here so it stops until you put more filament in. That is always an option too. Most all the accessories for this you can get on Thingiverse. Also, these both come with a small amount of filament. Some people just throw it away. I don't think it's too bad. I mean, who cares if it's good filament for your first print? What else? Normally, the reel would have been on top of this box, and this would have set off to the side. And to save space, I put it up here. This can be found on Thingiverse, and so can the spool holder. This one already had it on top. I printed these rollers from Thingiverse. These are just skateboard bearings. You can get a box of these on Amazon for like $7. I've got one here and there and over on this one. Drag chains are printed. I got another drag chain back there. Got Tiny Groot riding on the stepper motor shaft. And I've got Bender over here. So, and the legs, of course. I like these taller because you can put stuff underneath of them. One major thing to consider in printing is humidity. If you can get it below 55%, it does make the models so much better. It was about 68 to 70% the other day, and I think that's why I get a lot of stringing here. You know, PLA does not like moisture, and when it's in the air, it's just that much harder for it to separate, I guess you could say. Normally, this blue filament works great. Types of filament. I've only used 4 or 5. TPU is the stuff I'm printing with now, the soft stuff. There's PETG, that's kind of strong, but it's a lot harder to make look pretty. This is PETG. You can see that the surface is kind of splotchy. It's got some electrolysis looking holes in there. And it's not really electrolysis, just a comparison. If you've ever seen a cylinder of electrolysis, it's not smooth like this. This stuff is kind of flexible. It's supposed to be pretty strong. It's almost too flexible for some things. ABS also needs a hot environment. People have printed AR-15s with ABS. It's the strongest stuff. It's really good for RC boats. It doesn't absorb water like PLA does. And the only thing is, if you print it on one of these are open. You'll find a lot of them have an enclosure so the hot environment stays around the part. Well, most people buy like a Celotex they'll buy a Celotex board, I should say, and chop it up and make a box around this, and then you can have an enclosed environment. So, or you could do cardboard, I guess, but you're trying to keep the table 74 degrees Celsius, and then you want all this to be warm. I tried printing a RC wheel out of ABS and figured it'd be a lot stronger than PLA, and it would have been, but it gets about halfway done, or I would say a ½ inch off the table, and it gets away from that heat that's on the table, and it starts to come apart, and it just does not like to be cool. PLA, you don't have that, of course. So PLA is fairly cheap. When I got into it, you could get a whole roll of Solutech 3D for $15, and they must have caught on because now it's $18 to $25. But most every spool anyway, reel, whatever you want to call it, it's 1 kilo or 2.2 pounds, and it's around 300 meters. Might say on one of these how long it actually is. Here's one that says 300. You see that? Here's one that says 325 meters, 1,000 grams. And this is a known silk silver. This is the reflective stuff. Esun, I have a friend that's all he prints with. He thinks it's the best. It's about the same cost, $22, I think. I've tried Overture, like Overture. Ceramic 3D, they sent me the wrong color twice, a white and a black. And it was PETG, it wasn't PLA, so I used it anyway. I was like, oh, cool, I'll just try it out. It wasn't very expensive. Cytec 3D I like a lot. They send you 3 stickers with every spool. And I've got them everywhere. So, I wish they hadn't gotten more expensive. Lots of people like Hatchbox. Can't go wrong with Hatchbox. In my opinion, if you want to know it's good, can't go wrong with them at all. And, of course, I'm cheap, so I have to venture into the cheap stuff and see if it's any better. Another Cytec. And these last quite a while. I mean, I think I've gone through 6 or 7 spools so far. And if you think you're going to run out, you can also pause this and pull this out, run another color in, and finish it off. So it is possible to continue when you run out if you're standing there. You don't need a real fancy computer to 3D print. A very slow one will probably work just fine. When you get to slicing very large objects, though, it does take a little more processor. I got this HP computer from a guy at work for free. I needed a hard drive. I got a hard drive for $25, and I got a quad-core processor. So I put Linux on this. This is Linux Ubuntu. You can get it for free online. Cura is what I use for all my slicing software, for all my slicing needs, I guess I could say. It's also free. They have it for Linux. I think you can get it for Chromebook, maybe. I'm not sure about the Chromebook stuff, but the Ultimaker, they're updating it all the time. We'll open up our Cura here. Okay, so here's Cura. One thing to know about Cura is it's going to take your model, slice it, and like I was talking about earlier with layers, the thicker the layer, the quicker it's going to be, but the lower the quality. So most everything standard quality is 0.2 millimeters per layer. We're going to put a model on here. I get most of my models from Thingiverse. Some of them I get from GrabCAD or other websites of 3D objects, but some of those objects you have to convert into an STL file. Cura will only print an STL file. So if you get on Thingiverse and you're looking for a model, sometimes there's more than one type of model on there, and try and keep it an STL. So we'll open up our download files folder here, downloads, open up our downloads. These are all models. And then we'll go back to Cura here. And I have 2 different printers on here. The cool thing with the Crealities is, like I said, they're very common. So when you get Cura, you can add each printer on here, and it will fill in a lot of the gaps. I don't know if it changes feed and speeds or not, but the best part is the table size. Like here's a CR10 table, and here's an Ender 3 table, and you can see it change sizes. And now you know how big you can actually print. So we're going to print with our Creality Ender 3. We're on the Ender 3. Make sure we got the right material up here. We are going to use PLA. 70% infill. We want 70%. 0.28 layers, fine. And this will have a pretty simple, for first-time users, you don't have to go in and change as many things. It's pretty much just got infill, material temp, and speed on the original version if you don't go in and add extra settings. So just to let you know. So we'll go in here and do 70%. Our infill is going to be triangles. Go about 204 degrees. I don't run this hot most of the time, but I found that every filament has its likings. Solutech 3D likes to run about 202 to 204. Hatchbox, you could do 185 to 200, whatever you feel like doing. It's pretty versatile. 185, I think, is what the default is on Cura. And so different filaments. Wood likes to go about 200. ABS, you have to run pretty hot. The table, you have to be more like 75 degrees Celsius. And you have to be 240 on the nozzle. So, and the cool thing is when you change your filaments here, it will fill that in for you. And it'll say, hey, do you want to keep the settings that you just had with the last filament? Because now we're going to change it. And hit discard, and it gets rid of all the settings that you had in the other one. And now you can see it changed to 240, 80 degrees on the build plate or the bed. Our print speed's down to 50. That'd be the default. You can change that as you want. And our travel speed changes with the infill speed and print speed, so you don't have to worry about that. None of this stuff you ever have to worry about bottom layers. You can make it thicker on the top layers, bottom layers if you want to, but I rarely have to mess with it. Retraction, I like to enable retraction. This will pull back in the filament before it goes to another area, so it doesn't drag. You'll find that some filaments, sometimes when they strang, it's not because it's running too hot. Sometimes it's so cold it will not break off the end of the tip. So don't rule out going hotter over cold. A lot of people do. At the same time, this is a hobby. You're not going to print right every single time. It takes practice. So we go over to our files here. And we'll pull in, we need our threads. And we're printing for 2 jack stands, so we need 2 of these. And you can do it one of 2 ways. You can just drag it from over here into there, or you can right click and hit multiply selected model. 1. Okay, now we got 2. We'll also need our pin, so we'll drag this guy over. And we need 2. Drag it over again. You can see it adds it on there. And then we'll go and get our bolt. There's a bolt on here someplace. There it is. And there is our 10 millimeter scale bolt. We need 1 more of those. And come on, turn. For reference, down here is your X, Y, and Z. The blue arrow is Z, and the red is X, and the green is Y. So this is always going to be the left corner. If you don't like the arrangement on here, you can select them, move them around, move. It's kind of hard to do this and hold the camera. You can also right click on any of these and go to arrange all models, and it arranges them. I found that with these printers, the Y is more stable than the X, being it's more rigid. So I like to put the bigger items in the middle because it'll come out better quality if you do most of your heavy printing in Y. You know what I mean? You don't want to have a great big object here and a great big object here, because they're not going to be as close to the same as if you put them in Y, because this axis is more rigid. So we've got everything on our table. We'll go down here to slice, and as a reminder, it's going to slice it at 0.28 millimeters. This doesn't have to be fancy, it's just a jack stand. And 20% infill, that's not enough. Oh, got myself here. We don't want to print an ABS. We go back to PLA, and it's generic. I'm not doing eSun. PLA. And we're in PLA now. Go back to 204. plate 55 is what I normally do for PLA. We could go... I normally go about 80 for 0.28 because it's low quality, and I can get away with that. But being we're doing threads and this has to actually screw into a hole, we'll do 70. And we do, this is in regards to the fan that's on the nozzle. So yes, we want it 100%, and it's going to do in stages. By default, it's going to go probably do the first 2 layers with no fan, so don't get discouraged if the fan doesn't come on. And then it's probably going to do a couple more layers at 30%, and maybe 75%, and then 100. If it just goes from like 50 to 100, don't worry, that's in the software. I never mess with that. It always seems to work. You want your first layers to really stick to the bed, and that's why you don't want any fan on them, because you want them to be sticky as much as possible. So we'll go down here and hit slice, and then it's processing, and this is really where you can tell if you have a slow computer. This isn't a very big object, and it still took that long. So it's going to be 7 hours, and you can also go to preview here, or you can go up to the top and go to preview, and then it's going to show us all our layers individually. So under adhesion in the list over here, it'll do 3 runs around the outside of this before it starts to print, so it gets all the air out of the line and get a little warm-up cycle, I would say. You can always add more layers to that or widths. You can make this 10 times around if you wanted to, but it's really just a waste of filament. So you can see how the color changed on this, and then you can come over here. We're going to do 348 layers. So that's the top layer, 348. We'll just go halfway. You can see how the layers are changing, and this is our infill shape. So that's triangles. Pretty sure that's triangles. No, it's cubic. I want to do triangles because it's the strongest, and this thread is actually going to hold the truck up. So since I changed the infill pattern, you have to reslice it. And now it is triangles. You can see how we have our pins down here on their side. See what they look like, because it's going to print them crossways. And there should be enough arch that this won't require any support. It should be able to build out on the edge as it gets rounder. So you can see how it's changing. And I might want to come back and do those solid, but they're not very big, so we'll just chance it. And it's going to be 7 hours, 16 minutes, and we'll use 21.62 meters and 64 grams worth of weight. You can also go into your preferences and put in how much the reel was or spool, and every time it prints, it'll tell you how much exactly you have into it. But really, overall, you get a lot of prints on one reel. Okay, so we've got our file ready to go, and it's pretty much spat out all of these layers into a G-code file. So we need to get that G-code file into the machine. So this comes with an SD card reader. It's USB. And it comes with an SD card. Put our SD card in here. And hit, well, you can see it change to save to removable device. There it goes. Save to removable device. Removable device. And eject. And we'll pull this back out. And I found with these, I helped a friend put his together, and his SD card slot was upside down. So don't cram it in with the top side up. It might not go in that way. This one is right side up. Got our SD card in here. We'll flip on our master switch. Bam. And when the servos aren't on, this is all freewheeling. You can push it around One thing to think about, if you do get like a CR10, you can see how close I have it to the edge of the table. That's because the table moves off the edge of the frame here. It'll extrude further than the frame of the machine. And like right now, it goes clear up to the wall. So think about that before you push it all the way against the wall. So, back to business. We got our printer on. We'll go click on the knob here and go to print from TF. On the CR10, it says print from SD. This one says print from TF. I have no idea why. That's just the way they are. China. And we'll go to Threads version 2. One thing to think about is when you don't know what your file name was, like if you have 20 or 30 files on one SD card like I do, a good way to find out, you go back to your software here, and on the left corner here it says Creality Ender 3 Threads version 2. You go back here. Oh, exit out of me. Creality Threads version 2 G-code. Come on, go down. And enter. And now it goes straight into preheat mode. So it always preheats the bed first. It's going to be 55 degrees. It gets there, and then it's going to preheat the nozzle. So while it's doing that, we'll go ahead and get our spool up here. So we've got our spool on. We'll go ahead and run it down here into this little pulley hole. Comes out there. And then run it through the little eye hole on this lever. And in it goes. If you have a good knob printed, you can also run it in this way, but it's quicker just to squeeze it and run it in. And the best thing about this is it has a very clear Bowden tube, so you can. It has a very clear tube, so you can see the filament go through there as you're filling it out. And we got a bend in here, so I'll have to take this off. Okay, another thing about setup I would mention is the way this thing adjusts on the tightness on the rail here is it has these little wheels that are tapered that fit in the grooves of the side of these bars. And these bolts are eccentric, so every one of the hex, like this one, where it's actually a nut, you turn that and this thing is on an eccentric bolt that goes in or out. Sometimes when you get these, they're loose. And you want them to be snug, not so tight. Like I like to get them just tight enough to where you can turn it without moving, but not so much like it almost wants to go when I go up. But down, it just, you can spin it. The bottom one, same thing. And the inside one, yeah, it's good. Now, if you could just spin it freely, it's too loose. And if you can't spin it without this thing going up and down, then it's too tight, in my opinion. That's the way I like them. And you'll notice the first, I don't know, 100 hours probably this thing runs, it's going to leave a little bit of material on the top of the wheel that rubs off. And, well, you can see the rubber kind of comes apart. And it's breaking in, and it's just unavoidable. You can run them looser, but then they just wear to looser. And, you know, they're going to eventually get looser, so it's one thing to keep an eye on. Belts haven't had any issues at all. I printed these little covers to keep dog hair out of there. Not necessary by any means. Another thing I should mention is the Ender 3 comes in a lot of pieces. You have to put pretty much the whole thing together. I think it might have one piece assembled like the... no, I don't think it is. I think you have to put pretty much everything together. With the Ender, I mean the CR10, it comes in two pieces. The top piece is all together and the bottom piece is all together. And all you have to do is pull this out of the box and bolt it on the frame here with this little T-bar. And that's pretty much it. You don't have to do hardly anything else. Plug wires in. This thing is a lot more work, but once again, it's half the money. So these little wheels down here level out the table or bed. If you're a machinist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I shouldn't even have to tell you. But with this one, the Creality directions will tell you to go to each corner of the bed and then level it out. So they want you to run this thing down, and they're probably going to tell you to run down to the limit switch, and you can just turn the lead screw in the back and run it up and down. And as long as it's level, it's level. You can always change it as it's going, but it'll watch out for your clips here. They will catch. And the worst thing about these is the tables are never flat, and the glass is never really flat either. So even if you do level it out on the corners, some people go out and buy mirrors because they're flatter. And that works. If you want to do that, no problem. I still use these beds. I just get it pretty close. This one's already set up, so I don't have to do it. But I just go to all four corners and see if it looks really close to the same. And if it does, I leave it alone. But the best way is to use a piece of paper. You can put a piece of paper in here and feel it and run this up or down. And it even says on here which direction up or down is. This thing will zoom in there. There we go. Yeah, it says up and down there. This one, I even made myself a label when I first got it, so I'd know. But anyway, tightening it obviously brings it down, and loosening it makes it go up. So we will adjust this one. So just about on the table. And this guy over here. Just about on the table. This guy's just about on the table. This guy is pretty close too. That's approaching production. Extruder heating, extruder heating, extruder heating. Heating done! Ooh, and things start to happen. You can see it's got some filament coming out of the nozzle from preheat already. And it's going to do a test run here, get all the air out of the line. And you can see how it's got a lot of blue still in the nozzle. That's what I had in there last time. And it's going to start laying down its first 3 lines. Go ahead and pull this off. And you can see how it's kind of thin there and thicker here. That's what I mean, is sometimes it's taller in the middle than it is in the corners. And I probably do as much leveling with the first 3 runs as I do with the corner deal. And it's kind of tall right here, not on each end. So it's like, do you go with it? You can if you want to. I'll bring this side down just a little bit. This one corner. And that's 3D printing. It's going to start doing our individual outlines. The one's coming along pretty good. Also, one thing to think about with TPU is you can print TPU with these printers, no problem. It's pretty cool that you can do such a soft material. But the only thing is the hole running through these metal extruders, probably plastic ones too, is too big for the diameter of this because it's so soft it wads up, and it starts to do this number when it gets in the hole. And take this guy off. You can see right there, that little plastic point coming out of there is actually a piece of Bowden tube that I cut at an angle, and it fills the gap there. And I forgot what it was. I think it's like maybe an 1/8 inch hole you have to drill in there. There's a YouTube video on it. I'll have to try and figure that out. But you drill the hole bigger, and it's just a little bit smaller than the Bowden tube. You want it to press in there and cut the end of the razor blade, and it fills that gap. So when this TPU runs through there, it goes right in real smooth, and there's no space to bunch up. The tubes coming in and out of this little area here, a lot of times there's play, and it goes back and forth, and it makes your prints not as clean lined because the filament's never going back to the same place twice. So I super glued this one. I tried zip tying it and everything else, and people say do this and print that, and super glue works fine. I'll yank it out when I have to. See, this one doesn't do that. I just have the regular stuff on it, and it works fine. You can see how shiny this is from being on that clean glass table, and you can see where the glue was. It's just a little duller. But you can also see how the corner rolled up because I didn't have enough glue on there. I mean, it looks great. I love the shine, but not flat. How do you fix it? Simply glue. I wanted to show different types of infill. Probably the most common one, being it's a default, is cubic, and the walls are angled, and they make little 3D cubes in there. I think this is probably 25, maybe 20% infill. This is probably 15 or 20% infill also. This is grid. It's just cross-sectioned. Little squares. Good example of different layers. This one here is probably, I think I printed this at 0.08. And it might be 0.12. But it is very detailed because the layers are so thin. And this had no support. The ceiling is tapered, so there was no flat areas in there to need support for. That took about 3 days. So yeah, overall, I would say the Ender 3 or the CR10, great printers to start with. Can't go wrong with them. They do come with slicing software, but you might as well download Cura because the stuff I got was all in Chinese. I think it works, but it's all in Chinese. It does come with all the tools you need. Comes with a putty knife or scraper, if you will. And I'm pretty sure both of these came with a tiny roll of filament. And filament's pretty cheap anyway. Pretty cool two-tone. You can also do 2 colors with a single nozzle. You can get multi-color nozzles, but they're all going to require another servo motor. So if you can imagine, this has 1 nozzle and 1 servo motor and 1 tube. You're going to have 3 or 5 or 7 tubes and servo motors and all these spools to worry about. If you do just a plain two-tone like this with a single nozzle, you can just stop right before it starts the layer where everything's going to be black and do the whole back in white, and then when it gets to this next layer you can just change the color and it'll go right back to where it was. And not too hard to do, something to think about. If I didn't cover anything that you're wondering about, comment below. We'll do another one. I'm sorry it took me so long to get this video out. I know that I put in the comments, I hope I can get it done tonight, and that was like last week. And I actually did do a whole video on it, but then I figured out later when I was editing video that everything was in skinny mode on my phone instead of wide mode. And I just couldn't do that. So I had to do it over again. And I was writing down stuff all week. What would I want to ask myself if I was doing this? So, thanks for watching. Hobbies and Hot Rods. Next time on Hobbies and Hot Rods, the beginner CNC machine. Is it worth 200 bucks? Newly acquired Losi Super Baja Ray. Can we do 50 without blowing the tires off the wheels?